I'm just wondering because, I mean, in order to avoid all of these speculations, as it were, one wonders, at what point should or will the Office of the National Security Advisor speak up on these matters? Because he signed off the end user certificate on this matter.
Yeah.
So there's no statement whatsoever.
No, they have. I read one on, yes, sure. I read
about one, but the first
one. I'm not sure about the first one.
Okay.
But certainly the second one, which I think is actually more relevant, because you see, well, which exposes the South Africans far more. And of course, the NSA's office had to come out rightly to explain the position that, look, this was a perfectly legitimate transaction. These guys did not, I mean, if they were criminal in nature and people didn't supply the goods, I mean, that they would say, oh, do the what they call, I don't call it, they do the Nigerian thing. Oh, you paid the money, the goods were not supplied. And then we will be on this program and I'll be trying to say, look, listen, perhaps there's an explanation for the fact that we paid money, we didn't even ask for our money back. And you would say, well, obviously somebody's sharing the money. In this case, our government said, look, we paid monies. We are the end user. We need this to fight this war. We paid these people. Your South African company could not or refused to supply the arms. And we want our money back so that it will go back to our coffers. You transfer it back. The money was in transit. The South African government now jumped in and said, oh, we want to investigate this for money laundering. This is not the act of a friend.
How did the money get there in the first place? Was it through the bank or it came through an aircraft the way this
No. It was the more conventional means of transfer.
Because with that proof, if we truly have that the money actually came through the banks in the first instance, then it would have been easier to also get it back into the country through the same process.
Yeah.
So why was it stopped?
Sure. You mean the second one?
The second one.
The second one was stopped. As far as I'm concerned, well, that question is best put to the South Africans. Because my own view about that is that they did it simply to embarrass our government, embarrass our security agencies, and to ensure that, it puts another obstacle to our efforts to prosecute our war and procure arms for ourselves. I mean, if you're throwing monies down and they don't supply, I mean, why would they not supply the arms that were paid for?
The question also will be, because, I mean, let us also look at this. They say they're investigating this for money laundering. They're treating it as a criminal investigation. Why hasn't the Nigerian, I beg your pardon, Chairman asked a question. Why hasn't the Nigerian government spoken up on this one? If we say that this one is totally legitimate, let's not forget that, a lot of Nigerians have business concerns in South Africa. And we do know that, the South African government had cooperated with us when we had to, find out what was happening in the Niger Delta. Let us not forget that history of arms dealing also with, Niger Deltans in South Africa and the fact that some Niger Deltans had heavy interests in South Africa. Can we tie this into the investigation that is currently ongoing?
As far as I'm concerned, Mokwe, the investigation or the so-called investigation is politically motivated, it is ill-informed, it is nonsensical, it is an attempt to, one, discredit our country, discredit our security agencies, and most important of all, it is another attempt to try to stop us from procuring the arms that we need to prosecute this war.
Politically motivated by who?
Well, like I said this earlier, and I'll repeat it again. As far as I'm concerned, apart from the Americans, and I've gone into detail on that one, there are elements within this country that are within the opposition that are very, very close to President Zuma. Two of them that I know of. I won't mention names here. I'll mention names if you can organize a live debate with a key member of, I'm saying somebody like, one of their brightest people like El Rufai, not some that are not so bright, I'll mention any names you like, and I'll do that, but I'm prepared to say now that at least two key members of the opposition that are very close to President Zuma and funded his campaign, helped him in his campaign, and have remained very, very close friends to him. As far as I'm concerned, there's also that element of, listen, do what you can to help us to discredit this government. An election is coming. And I think that is unfortunate. I believe that the behavior of the South Africans is indicative of the fact that they will do anything to help their friends in the opposition in Nigeria.
But some people will also say that, there are also people within government in the PDP that are equally as close, perhaps even closer than,
I will tell you this
some members in the
clearly
APC.
And categorically. I do not know anybody in this country, and I know quite a lot of people, that are as close to President Zuma as the two individuals that I will not name on this program until the time comes and we have a public debate on it, if they're ready for that, any day, any time. I don't know any two people in this country that I know that President Obasanjo has immense respect and has a relationship with President Zuma. He's a younger person than Obasanjo, and he's a very junior person to Obasanjo. But that is not friendship. That is big brother and little brother. I'm talking about Zuma's friends in South Africa, and I think it's about time that the Nigerian people begin to ask questions about that. What really is the intention of President Jacob Zuma? What are the intentions of the Americans? What is the relationship, what is the nature of the relationship that exists between key opposition leaders? And I'm not talking about the APC as a party, I'm talking about two individuals, okay, that are close to Zuma. And does that have any link with these allegations and these criminal investigations and these things that anything Nigeria wants to do, legitimate or apparently illegitimate, they will now say, oh, this is evidence
we really have to be very careful here, because now you just mentioned two key countries, United States and South Africa.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the war against terror.
Yes.
And the last time we saw President Jonathan at the UN General Assembly speaking, well, extensively on the fight against terror. So it means that the Americans are on the same page with Nigerians on the fight against terror. So if you say they're trying to jeopardize this effort of us getting arms to fight the terrorists, lots of people would find that hard to take.
Well, they need to do a bit of research and look at history and look at contemporary events in the country. It is nothing new to say that the Americans, despite the fact they have a declared war against terror, the same Americans supported what is today ISIS in their fight, and al-Nusra in their fight against Bashar al-Assad's government, a secular government who many people have differences with, but who, were being, a war was being waged against by a bunch of Islamists, al-Nusra, ISIS, and so on and so forth. The narrative is clear. The Americans have a record of doing that kind of thing. You say one thing, you sometimes arm those that you're supposed to be fighting in order to achieve your objective. That's politics. That's international politics. Never take the words of particularly the Americans or any other Western government at face value. Look at their actions.
But it doesn't mean that there's any kind of support from the West.
I'm saying clearly and categorically.
For Boko Haram.
I've said it before, and I'm saying clearly and categorically on this program that the fact that the Americans refused to label Boko Haram as a terrorist organization up until the beginning of this year, despite the fact they had killed almost 15,000 people, raises questions in my mind. The fact that the Americans have been uncomfortable with us procuring the arms that we need to prosecute this war raises questions. The fact that the opposition will go all over the world and say we're killing innocent civilians and therefore our soldiers should not be armed raises questions. And the fact that Zuma is close to key members of the opposition and Zuma's government goes out of his way to discredit us, even in an attempt to procure arms for our people, raises questions. That's what I'm saying. And I think these are legitimate observations. If I may say so very briefly, on the issue of Pastor Ayo Risejafo, because I think he has had some pretty bad press on this.
Very briefly, because we're out of time now.
On this issue. To say that he's the head of Boko Haram in Nigeria is rather like saying, which key opposition figures have said, is rather like saying that the Pope is the head of ISIL or al-Nusra and so on and so forth. I mean, it's absurd. And this is evidence again of the perfidy that some of those that seek to oppose him and oppose this government indulge in.
Sorry, Chamberlain, but again, we're lucky. If the ownership had been tied to someone with a Muslim name or a Muslim, the narrative would have been different,
well, let me put it to you like this, and that's a good one. But if that had been the case, would those that are alleging that Urisejafo is an arms dealer and a murderer and a promoter of Boko Haram, would they have complained? They wouldn't have complained. They would have kept quiet and said, well, we accept and we believe that, for example, the Sultan of Sokoto, who is the counterpart of the president, we take him at his word. Rightly so, because I would have. This is the Sultan of Sokoto we're talking about. Why can't we take our own president of Canada as well? Let me give you, just very briefly, 3 examples of the kind of perfidy these people indulge in. Apart from the fact that Kaigama's comments, about Bishop Kaigama, about the activities of the presidents of Christian Association of Nigeria, They completely turned it upside down and said that Kagame had condemned the president of Cannes. This wasn't the case. Kagame had to come and say, we never did so. The Catholic bishops never did so. Another one is the case of Pastor Bosu Emmanuel. There's a tape that's going around about the attack on the church in Nigeria. And they came out with a statement a couple of days back that Pastor Adeboye had condemned this tape and had withdrawn it. It's not true. This tape was purchased and distributed by Pastor Adeboye, RCCG, at their convention in August, and he recommended that people should go and listen to it. You know, this sort of continuous flow of disinformation and so on and so forth, in order to discredit people, in order to bring people that I think is unfortunate and unfair. And I think Orisejafo has been subjected.
Let me just add this before we wrap up. Rotimi says, are you saying that the federal government under the president is so weak that the opposition will ride roughshod in the international community?
I really don't see the basis of that. First of all, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we are prosecuting or we're fighting or we're not getting the support that we need from our natural allies. And it's clear to me that the South Africans are in some kind of collusion with elements in the opposition here. Despite that, we're doing very well. And I'm also saying that we have an NSA that is a man of integrity, that has turned the tide. And, you know, I think that we should give our military and our security agencies some credit for that. Kudos to them.
All right, thank you for coming on this morning. Mr. Femi Fani-Kayode is a former Minister of Aviation and a member of the PDP. We'll be back after this break. Join us again.